welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. Today we have on Mandeep with Orbit Realty. Super excited to have you on. This is one of my team partners. We work together. He's up in the Yuba area, killing it out there. Super excited to have you on, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. So what we like to do is we like to kind of get into, learning about our realtors past, a little bit of kind of your experience on what your back education was or your back, career path. I know that you've got into real estate relatively recently. So, kind of what were you doing before that and what made you want to get into real estate?
Actually, it's kind of a funny story. So, several years ago, I flipped a couple of houses and really liked it. And then the market just tanked. And then I ended up following my current career path. Initially became an EMT, then was a firefighter for a while. And then my current career, which is a paramedic when I'm not doing real estate.
Awesome. And so what made you want to become an EMT and paramedic?
Same reason I want to become a realtor is just to help people. A lot of the things that happen in real estate actually happen in EMS all the time. There's a lot of problems that people come up with or, are dealt, and, I kind of like to navigate through them, kind of try to think outside the box. And really, at the end of the day, if I can help somebody, it makes the day go really much better.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I know that we have that conversation a lot with the people that I've had on the podcast. I think the kind of telltale sign of being a successful realtor or somebody within this industry is that there's always this kind of underlining idea of that we kind of have this drive to help people, right? And I think that's really divergent from what a lot of people think realtors are. We always get this kind of comparison, and sorry, car salesmen out there, but we always get this comparison that we're like car salesmen in that sort of archetype and stereotype that we're just trying to push you into something as fast as we can. And that might be the case for some realtors, and I'm sure that, it happens. But I know that at Orbit, our broker is very specific about who he'll bring on. And it's always that kind of idea of, we're really in this to help people. And I think that shines through from your past experience, right? Of that's what you did. That's what you signed up to do, right? I mean, that's your whole past job is helping people.
Correct. And that's one of the main things I really like about Orbit Realty in general is we're not really money driven. We're more people driven. So, I don't know about you guys, but I'm more than willing to take a little bit off my commission if it, it helps the client get over, if it's with a down payment or, closing cost or whatever. At the end of the day, they're trusting us to facilitate one of their biggest life decisions. And I'm pretty excited about that, and pretty, it shows a lot when a client comes to you and says, "Hey, I want you to be my realtor." They're instilling a lot of confidence in you.
Yeah, I have to agree. And it's interesting that you bring that up, right? I mean, we're not discount realtors. And what I mean by that is maybe you're driving on the freeway or somewhere, you'll see a billboard that says, 1% transactions and things like that. And there are brokerages that do stuff like that. And I think a lot of times they do that because they do really, really high volume. So they're maybe taking on, 10, 20 clients a month. And so they can afford to discount it. But then there's really a question of service and quality, right? That comes into place. But as far as it comes to some sort of concession to be able to help your client get into the house, I think that, I've seen a lot of people in our brokerage do that. And one of the things that I saw our broker do one time, which I was really surprised to see him do it, as well as kind of like humbled, I guess, is we had a client that we'd been working for. She was trying to get into this property and she was living in a hotel because she was in between housing. And there was essentially everything was ready to close, everything was good to go, and then there was a mess up on the lending side, and that's not a mess up with Orbit Home Loans. That was a mess up from the actual lender that we were working with. Their underwriting staff had made some sort of mistake, and it was going to delay the process for a week. And it's not our fault. I mean, it happens in the industry, but ultimately this was going to cost this woman another, I think, like $500 or $600 to have to stay at these apartments, and he covered it. He just took the money out of what he would have made, and he covered it for her. He didn't have to do that. And I remember that distinctly, because I feel like that's the sort of stuff that you do what's right ultimately, right? And so I always found that to be really powerful, and that's how I kind of try to lead my way. And I know that's the sort of ethos that we try to develop within our brokerage. And I know that you fit into that kind of model really well. So I want to go back a little bit. I know that you still are an EMT, you still are involved with that. But getting licensed, what was that experience for you? I know, because you had to, becoming an EMT is not easy either, right? Or anybody in that field. Did you find the real estate exam and that stuff like difficult, or was it like pretty straightforward for you?
I think it was just two different beasts. So when I got getting through paramedic school, and then internship, and then hospital time, I still had a final test to do, and it's called the National Registry. And it was rough. Like, there's only a few people that I know that have passed it the first time. The same thing with the realtor test. There's only a handful of people that I know that have passed it the first time. And so I think it was just a different hard,
Hmm.
especially coming from kind of a public service mindset into trying to get into a realtor's mindset. There are so many terms, there are so many like left ball things that they can throw at you, and it was just having the discipline of sitting down an hour every day, at least an hour, and going through my study books, going through everything, and and then when I felt I was ready, I would go take the final test for the realtor test. And it took me once or twice to get it done, but at the end of the day, I got it done.
Yeah, I always say that for me, I thought that it was a pretty difficult test, as well as, I studied extremely hard for it as well, right? But some people can learn the information very easily and just pick it up. So I think always it's an interesting thing when we're talking to realtors, and we don't very much talk about that aspect of becoming a realtor, but the hope is to really provide some insight to those that are listening to this who are interested in becoming a realtor, or kind of to give some context to consumers about what the process is for us to become a realtor, right? And so I thought it was pretty difficult, and I've said this a couple times, but I know people like Randeep and Paul, they kind of just breeze through this sort of stuff, learn it super quick, and take the exam. And if you're lucky to kind of have that sort of mind that traps information, that's awesome. So um you said, actually didn't I actually didn't know this about you, but you said that you had flipped properties, and then you said the market turned. Was that around 2008 when the market had shifted, or when was that, and how did you kind of get into that?
It was actually a little bit earlier than that. It was, if I remember correctly, 2002 ish.
Okay.
Um, so I had a couple other things going on. Um, I was I was also a seasonal firefighter at the time, so I just didn't have time for it. And it was, as you know, flipping houses, you have to be there, and you have to be on top of your people to get things done. And I basically just didn't have the time to do that.
Right.
And so I kind of put it on the back burner, and then life happened. Got married, had kids, and so my kids are a little bit older now, so I'm able to devote some time away from my primary job and do that. And so
How was that experience of, because that's one of the few things that I haven't had a really an opportunity to get into, is flipping a property, right? I know kind of the general idea of how long you should try to hold on to it and how you should kind of have the money worked out, but kind of going through that day to day for you, what it was that like?
A little stressful, to be honest, because I had three other partners that were great, and the properties that we had were pretty much turnkey. There wasn't much we had to do with them, so I think I got lucky in that aspect, and I was really lucky because the market was still super hot,
Mm,
and so we turned and burned probably within two to 5 months.
okay.
And so once that happened, we were just kind of like, okay, what's our next property? Okay, what's
Mm,
our next property? And then it just got to a point where I just got too busy with my other job, and I had to tell him I have to step away at this point
right.
because one, I'm not going to be a good partner. Two, I'm not going to be focused. And three, if I'm spending all my time here, then I'm going to take away from my other job.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
fair.
is definitely something that I want to do maybe in a couple years. Just because, again, the main thing for me is time. I don't want to spend half my time here and half my time there, where I can focus my time more efficiently in one area.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's a really interesting time to be flipping, right? Because the market is kind of on its upward trajectory, and it's getting better and better. And before that, kind of 2007, 2008, that transition downwards to get in there. And now I think this is a really interesting time for people to be flipping properties, right? Because to me, it feels like you could get into flipping at kind of a lower margin before, and now properties are so expensive that you have to kind of have a bigger fund to be able to do that, which makes it harder to enter. Do you kind of think that as well?
I do. I mean, it's even harder for investors right now because unless you're unless you're giving all cash offers,
Hmm.
you're going to have to take out a loan. And at 8%, you have to account that into not only your general cost, but everything else is super expensive now too. Everything from plywood to um, kitchen faucets, you name it. You go into Home Depot, just about every time I go to Home Depot, I almost get sticker shock. You're like, oh, that went up, 10, 20, $30.
Right, exactly. You're right. So I think that for those of you that are out there and you're kind of considering, I see this a lot kind of on the marketing side, right? Like people who want other people to get into real estate, but they want them to use their courses or they want them to use their platforms or whatever it is. And wholesaling and flipping is kind of that big thing. And I haven't had anybody on yet who's done that, which is why I kind of want to spend a little time on it. Um, I work with our brokerage who we try when the market is right to purchase properties and do this similar thing. So I've had a little bit of experience going to the auction houses and looking for properties, on the MLS and things that make sense, right? But what I've realized is that if you want to try to get into these properties that are really kind of affordable for most people, like 100 to 200 people show up to try to get that one property, right? And then if you want to get into these higher end properties, you're bidding against either an investment firm or you're bidding against people that have, 500,000 to $1 million in cash reserves to to do it, right? So it's such a difficult thing to get your foot into. And I think right now in this market, like you're saying, the margins on things are so high that and granted we're talking from, a perspective of California. I think in other states this might be still a more feasible thing. But for here, it's such an interesting thing to see that sort of people that do that, grind, and I bet their margins are shrinking a bit.
Yeah, and kind of put it in perspective. I keep hearing this, we're going to have a big crash. We're going to have a big crash. I don't think we are. I think we're going to have a price adjustment, and I think things are going to eventually, probably in a year, go back to not necessarily what pre-COVID numbers were, but they're definitely going to adjust. And so the only time we've ever seen a real housing crash was in 2008 when people were losing their jobs. Other factors were coming in, people were getting foreclosed on. And so that's when we really saw things dramatically change. But now I think we're going to have a price adjustment.
Yeah, and I think, to dive into the 2008 crash would be, a whole nother podcast in itself. And even people that are maybe a little more competent on who were there during that time and really understand that, I've spent a fair amount of time looking into that market, and I understand, what happened and how there was abuse of consumers and kind of some from the larger markets, maybe, some, I don't want to say lying, but definitely some deceit or misunderstanding of what was going on there. But that has almost entirely been rectified in many ways by the changing of the way that lending laws are in place. And I see this all the time, and I hear this all the time with people who bought houses 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who are selling their house and want to buy a new house. And they always say the same thing, man, this is way harder than it was when I bought a house back then. I go, yeah, it's a lot more difficult, but it's a lot safer for you, right? You can almost guarantee that you're going to get put into a loan that you're going to be able to repay. There's not many options with recognized lenders that are going to, unless you specifically say like, I want this sort of ARM loan or whatever, we're always going to try to put you into the best loan. And that's in large part because of that crash. And so a lot of people don't understand that. They just think that, oh, well, the overarching numbers look very similar, right? Like rates are high and housing is high and whatever else, but that's not the case. It has a lot to do with the type of loans that are actually taken out, right? So I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see, we're not going to see a crash, right? In the way that where you saw properties dropping 25 to 50% in their value. But we will see an adjustment. And we've been saying over at Orbit Home Loans, we've been saying for a while that we were planning on ending this year anywhere from 7 to 10% in interest rates, depending on what the Feds did. And we're pretty close to that, right? Right now we're towards the end of September. Rates are pretty much at 6% if you're a good buyer. And if you're a bad buyer, and by bad, I mean, maybe your credit's not great. Maybe you don't have a great down payment. Maybe your debt to income's not great. You're closer to 7%. So I think we're kind of right on the money for that. And I know that you've been kind of transitioning back to you because this is not all about the market. I know that you've had you've had some sellers. How's that experience been going for you in this market? Because you've had them through the shift, which has been, I think, pretty difficult.
Yeah, honestly, it's trying to work with people, right? Is trying to see where they're at. And I don't ever push anybody to be like, hey, you're ready to buy, let's go get you a house, right?
Right.
It's more of, okay, where are you in life right now? Is it a good time to buy now? Maybe 6 months down the road, or maybe a little bit further than that. But if we have a game plan, it makes the process a lot easier and the whole experience a lot easier, not only on the client, but also on the realtor also.
Right. And on the selling side, how has that been for you, right? Because I know you had a duplex duplex, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for 2 more offers to come in, and then we're gonna more likely accept one.
Right. But has that been pretty difficult? Because I think you've had it on the market for a while now. This is obviously outside of like, this is the area that the property's in, or this is the condition of the property. I'm talking mostly about the shift in the market, right? Because you've had the property for, I think, maybe 3 months or so. something like that. And in that time, interest rates have gone up. And that's been really difficult for buyers. But then on the other side, the properties have started to go down, right? So I think for me, that would be a really difficult thing because we're like, okay, it's already a duplex, so it's a niche, whoever wants to have an investment property, as well as looking at it from the point of less and less people are able to qualify for this because the rates are going up. And then on the other side, every 2 weeks, you're going to have to tell your client, well, this property isn't worth as much as it was the week before. And that's kind of been the case because there's so much happening in the market. There's starting to be a lot of seller concessions, a lot of reduction in pricing. How have you navigated having to deal with both of those at the same time?
Well, and the other part is you always want to keep your client happy too. And
Mm-hmm.
that's always the big issue. Um, but it's a lot of it has been marketing, has been thinking outside the box, getting on social media, getting the word out, um, but also talking to your client like, hey, I think it's a good time to have a price improvement. And we happened to put a price improvement on it a week or two ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we're starting to get a little bit more traction again. So the people have seen it, um, have liked it, but the numbers just didn't add up for them. So they ended up not putting a bid in, which is fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Then I
we
think the hardest thing in a market like this, right? Where we start to see a kind of a pricing going down on properties, equity being reduced, and having to communicate that with your client because so many people, they go to places like Zillow or Redfin or wherever to get their real estate needs. I would highly recommend that you guys go to a personal broker page. They have the same information, but for the most part, personal broker pages are they're more up to date, right? They're real time almost. So like Orbit Realty, go to their website and you'll be able to see kind of the same thing you would say about Zillow. The problem with Zillow, I've heard and have seen at times is their information is not up to date, and I'm not sure what's happening between the MLS and their back end systems that are causing a delay. But ultimately, they're not always up to date, and so we always kind of have these problems with our clients. Is they really like to look at Zillow because they do have a clean format. It is information that is there, but it's not always up to date. So definitely check that. But the problem is that you're looking at a lot of times properties that are maybe not as accurate as they should be, right? They haven't been updated and things like that. And so people see like, oh, I want to sell my duplex and there's all these other duplexes and they're listed super high. Well, that could be a problem with the realtor. Maybe they don't understand how to list properties correctly and they're overlisting them, right? Or maybe they have a strategy. This happens a lot. Sometimes you underlist the property so you can get more people interested to have a bidding war. I mean, there's a lot of things at place here, so you can't really take that at face value. The only thing that you can truly trust is to work with your realtor and have them look at the past sales the similar properties in the similar area. Typically, that's within 1 mile. If you're dealing with kind of a duplex, it might be a little further out, but within 1 mile, within the last 6 to 12 months, and they'll be able to tell you what those properties are actually worth. And to me, and you can tell me how you feel, I sometimes feel like that's the hardest thing to work around with clients is that because they saw a Zillow posting that said that a similar property like theirs sold for 800,000. Well, your house is not worth that, right? Your house is probably closer to 600,000. Is to kind of communicate that to them. Have you kind of found that to be similar?
Yeah, just I use a duplex as an example, or actually another property that I was comparing it to. So the client gave me the post of, I think it was realtor.com or one of the websites,
Yeah.
and he said, Well, this house in that's less than 2 miles away from my house is worth, $900,000. Why are we posting it at 7? I'm like, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, is walking distance to a school. Two, it has a garage. Three, it has parking. Four, it's about five, I think it was 700 square feet bigger than your
Hmm.
residence. Has a bigger yard and a few other things. And it was a little bit newer also. It was like, I want to say it was 15 years newer.
Right.
So those are just some of the factors that you have to put in when you try to one market your property, and you don't ever want to overinflate the price or underinflate the price, um, where you can't justify why you made that price to begin with.
Right. And the
But
other thing that kind of goes with that on the back end that a lot of people don't understand is that when somebody's trying to buy that house, right? They you ultimately the number one thing that we want is we want to try to get the highest amount for you, and we want to close on time, right?
mhm,
Time is money for everybody that's involved with this process, including if you're selling your house. So, what people don't fully understand is that if they're trying to buy a house and they put, let's just use clear numbers, the house up for 620, right?
mhm,
620,000, and that house comes back and it appraises at 600,000, then one of two things are going to happen. Either you're going to stay steadfast and you're going to say, well, that's what we wanted for. So you, as the buyer, are going to have to commit to paying an additional $20,000 out of pocket above the appraisal price because you can never get a loan for more than what the house is worth, right? Or the seller is going to come down in price, and more times than not that's what ends up happening. So you can put it as high as you want, but almost always you're going to end up coming down to the appraisal price anyway, right? Now that is dependent on the market and things like that, but ultimately that's what we kind of see time and time again, right? So make it easy on yourself, make it easy on your clients, right? We always want to try to be within, I think, about $5,000 of where we want it, where it's going to appraise that, because at least that's somewhat of a manageable amount. So I think that that's like another thing that you kind of have to navigate with your clients, right?
yeah, I've learned that there's everything that can go sideways will go sideways. It's called Murphy's Law. But yeah, just be upfront with your client. That's all you can really do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because nobody likes a surprise, especially me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't prepare your client to, hey, this, A, B, and C couldn't go wrong, and kind of guide them through the process, it's not only easier on you, but it's easier on your client.
Yeah,
And
there's no
at the end of the
reason to
day,
finesse people, right? I mean, it's all going to come out eventually. You might as well
yeah,
just be as knowledgeable and honest as you can.
and exactly. I think honesty is the key to real estate and really in life. Because if you're dishonest with somebody, that means that they're not going to trust you. And so that relationship is going to go sour really quickly.
Yep, exactly. So you've been doing this. I know you're essentially doing real estate part-time right now. Does the hope to transition into full-time real estate, or do you still enjoy what you do? You'd like to continue to do that? What's kind of the plan for you?
Um, so my plan is in 5 years. Um, so I work for Inland Medical Center, so I can probably transition into another department. And so in 5 years, I'll probably transition out of my department into another department. And then after that, I think I have 5 years until I can retire from them,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can do real estate full time. But trust me, on my days off, I am doing everything real estate. It almost feels like a full time job now. I'm accustomed to having two full time jobs, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not a big deal to me. But that's the game plan for now is still be a paramedic for a little while, a little bit longer. I really still enjoy going to work. but I'm getting a little bit older,
Hmm.
and you don't see a lot of paramedics in their 50s still
Sure.
working the field, and I have no desire to go to management. So
Okay. So, when we had Lisa on, which is another realtor at our brokerage, we kind of talked about her experience as a nurse, because she's been kind of a high level nurse for a really long time, the last 25, almost 30 years.
oh,
And we're talking about how to utilize your past experience and use that as kind of a marketing tool to help get yourself business, right? And
mhm.
so you and I had a very similar conversation where I think a lot of times being a realtor almost becomes a part of your identity because you always have to be marketing yourself. But a lot of people, they don't take on their past experiences, right? And use that as a marketing tool. And so the same thing direction that I had with her was the same direction I was kind of telling you is how many people do you see marketing themselves as a paramedic realtor, right?
Mhm.
Or someone, an ambulance realtor, or someone in the medical field realtor, right? And using those sort of vernaculars, those sort of headlines interchangeably, I think that's such a powerful thing because not only are you showing that, hey, like I understand the connection, and I understand where you guys are at, but in all actuality, you actually understand what do most of these people get paid? How long does it take somebody to get paid like that to save enough money to buy a house, right? And you can start to use that information. If you talk to somebody and they say, hey, yeah, I've been a paramedic for 10 years, you probably know they have enough money, right, to buy a house, kind of on estimating things like that. So, have you had an opportunity or are you considering branching those two things together? Or do you find that there's maybe some sort of conflict there? Or are you just still trying to get a hang of how to brand correctly?
I think I'm still in the process of trying to brand myself correctly.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, obviously, I probably deal with anywhere from 50 to 150 people a day.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it's not always the appropriate time to bring it up.
Hmm.
But I think I can do stuff like I still have to get this approved by a broker, but like I can offer closing costs. You know, if you're military, first responder, hospital worker, dispatcher, um, I can offer closing cost incentives or down payment assistance or something.
Hmm.
And I think that um, we not only have a connection initially with doing the same job, but we're just helping each other out. We do this all the time at work.
Hmm.
Either we'll pick an extra shift up for somebody, or come in early, come in late, um, whatever it takes. And that's really that's why I'm here is to help people. And if I can help a fellow first responder or a hospital worker or um, somebody in the military, great. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I think the best implementation that I've seen of people using their past career are vets, right? And you see this very strongly in real estate, and really, it's not even real estate specific because there's not. I mean, it's not like as a realtor you can necessarily do anything for a vet, but it's the loan side, right? So
Mhm.
the VA programs to help vets get into houses at affordable rates, affordable costs, no down payments, things like that, right? I see vets do this very effectively, right? They're a vet, their experience, and letting other vets know, like, hey, you can use your VA benefits to get into a house that's affordable. And so I like to think that that could be the roadmap for people to do the same exact thing, right? I was a
Mhm.
coach for 12 years. There's coach associations. There's coaches that are out there now that I could network with. Like, hey, I was a coach. You're a coach. I understand the situation that you're in. Just as a way to kind of bridge that gap because that is one of the hardest things for people to do, right? Is go out and I think this happens kind of when you're younger. It's funny that there's not more realtors that are younger, because that's when you're the most vibrant for networking. When you get
Yeah.
older, you're kind of like, I got family, I have responsibilities, I'm tired, I'm working, right? But ultimately, right, when we talk to new realtors and they come in, we say, well, you need to work in your circles of influence, right? And a lot of people think that that means just I'm going to talk to my friends, I'm going to talk to my family, I'm going to talk to maybe my like kind of cousins that I haven't talked to in a while, right? Or maybe some friends that I haven't talked to in a few years. But really, what that means is taking a deep look at the skill sets you develop, the clubs you've been in, the work you've been in, and how do you connect in those associations, right? Um, and there's a lot of really cool apps and programs that you can use. And one that I just got reminded of the other day was Meetup. Meetup is an app that, and this is not a sponsorship by Meetup, but Meetup is an app that is used by people who essentially put together activities out in the community that you can do. So, like a local hiking group, if you like playing basketball and things like that, right? It's a great opportunity to say, these are things that I want to do. These are things that I want to be out in the community and way to network while still having fun, right? Because the conversation's always going to come up. Well, what do you do for a living, right? That's such a strong part of our identity. And so these are great ways to do that. And I'm hoping, as we continue to develop our realtors in house and we give them these tool sets on how to create your brand and how to transition from what you're doing now into a full-time realtor in the next 5 years, you start to take these sort of ideas, right? So have you kind of decided, is real estate? I know a lot of people are like, well, I'm a buyer's realtor, I'm a lister's realtor. And for me, I'm like, well, I'll help anybody on whatever side they're on. But have you picked a side that you think is a little more enjoyable for you, or are you liking both sides?
Honestly, I'm liking both sides. Both sides have their own thinking outside the box, their own set of challenges. Um, and honestly, it's been fun on both sides so far. So I think I'm just gonna roll with it until you know I don't like one side, or I start liking one side more than the other.
Hmm.
Then I'll choose that. For now, it's I like both sides, so I think I'm gonna just keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, real estate, you start to develop your career and define what you want to do by how you want to work. Some people really, really enjoy showing houses, right? They like to go out, they like that experience. And so that buyer side, and you see this a lot when you're kind of newer to the market as well, because you want to learn the communities, you want to be involved with what's going on, you want to see all of these properties. And sometimes you get clients where that's what you're doing. You're showing them 10, 20, 30 houses until they find the right house in different communities, right? Now, obviously, a good realtor will find a way to narrow these sort of things down for them. But I do find that listing properties is much less labor intensive, because you just list it. Maybe you host an open house, depending on the market. You put a lockbox out, you failed offers, things like that, but you don't have to spend all of your time driving around. And I think this is why certain people, they say, "Oh, well, I'm a seller's realtor, I'm a listing realtor," because that's the point in their life that they're out. They want to knock as many of those out, and you can kind of stack those on top of each other. Where buying is a lot more time consuming, right? But some people really enjoy that part of the job. And a great realtor will do both ultimately, right? Or at least their team will do both. And that's, what we hope for people is to turn this from a job into a career, right? So, we're getting towards the end of this podcast. I just kind of want to get your opinion on the current market, where you think consumers should be looking. I know that you're out in Yuba City, and that kind of, it's a little more rural out there. It's not kind of like, granted, Sacramento to a lot of people is not considered city, but it's a little more rural out there. What's it looking like out there in Yuba ish area? What should consumers that are looking to buy or sell expect?
Things are definitely cooling down. We're starting to see a little. a little more inventory. Is definitely not like it was, 6 months ago where, you put in a bid and there's 20 other bids for the same house. Um, the feeling I'm getting is people they're on the sidelines. They want to wait until interest rates come down. And I always tell them, let's look at some numbers. If the numbers make sense, let's go forward. If they don't, then let's not, and let's wait until it's more favorable for you. Um, but definitely, it's starting to cool down. And the main thing is people are scared of those interest rates. Nobody wants to pay 8% in interest rates. Not even 7. I think we got a little spoiled with the 2 and 3%, and that's what people start gravitating towards as well. Yeah, your payments are going to be higher with the higher interest rate, but overall, are you getting a better house?
Hmm.
Are you getting a better piece of property? Are you getting a better deal, even at 6% versus 2%? Um, so I think once people start realizing that, I think the market will start picking up again.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing to consider, and on the lending side, we go back and forth with this, right? Because typically the way that it'll work, and granted there's gonna be probably like 6 months in between where that shift is still happening, because real estate does happen pretty slow, um where property value starts to go down, so the cost of the house goes down but the interest rates are up, and that's kind of the point, right? The feds
Mhm.
raise the interest rates to try to stabilize or drop the housing prices so people will buy. um and so it's definitely kind of in that place right now where people are trying to figure out, and you're right. The 2 and 3% I think did really spoil people, because they don't know that traditionally rates really do sit around 8%, and even higher in the past, but housing prices were less, right? So
Mhm.
ultimately, I try to explain to people that buying a house is not always a one transaction deal, right? And for a lot of people, it isn't. If you're financially savvy, and that's what we want everyone that we deal with to be, they have to realize that when they're buying a house, that they might have to refinance at some point to make it have sense, right? Or they might have to carry something for a while, because right now your credit's not as well as it could be, but we can improve that with you. And then when the time comes, then we'll get you into a lower rate, the market, when the market's right, things like that, right? So
Mhm.
I think, it's a journey when you're doing real estate, and very seldom do people kind of, they're in the best position where their credit's great, they have all their money, they have all their reserves, the market's perfect, and they buy a house, right? So kind of keep that in mind, guys, as you're out there, right? The number one thing in California, because we're an equity state, is to get on the housing ladder. There we have numbers upon numbers that, you know, say that statistically owning a house over the long term is significantly more of a financial benefit for you than renting. And there's a lot of people that don't fully understand that. That's something we can help you understand, but you need to get on the housing ladder, and that's the first way to really kind of make these moves. So before we go, I do want to say, do you have any advice for people who are interested in getting into real estate or just brand new into real estate to kind of make this process a little more streamlined and easy for them?
Really do your research to get into it because I had to think long and hard if this is something I wanted to do. Um, Realize that it's not all glamour. Like there's a lot of hard stuff about real estate. Talk to current realtors. That's one of the big things I was fortunate enough to do is talk to a couple of realtors that they were straight up with me. They said, don't expect anything big to happen your first 6 months, and then after that, things should start falling into place. Be patient. Things take time. Once you get into it, um, be in it to be in it. Because unfortunately, statistically, was it like 90% of realtors stop being realtors after the first 5 years, and like I want to say 60 to 70% quit after their first year because they just get frustrated. So believe in your broker, believe in the place that you pick. Pick the brokerage that's going to be best for you, and then things should fall into place.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. There's the top 10% of people that are doing 90% of the business. And those people have pretty
Mm-hmm.
much stayed in the market. They are career realtors, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those numbers that you're kind of putting out, I think they're relatively close, but the general idea is that most people who get into real estate, they don't stay in it because it is really difficult. And that's the sort of reality that I want us to be able to present on this podcast. There's a lot of great things that we can get out of it. Sometimes the money can be really good, but it can be a really demanding job, like really all sales commission based only jobs, right? They can be really difficult, really taxing. And so I a lot of times I tell people, hey, I hope you have some reserves of money that are going to be able to support you. You have somebody maybe behind you that's helping you, or this is literally what you're going to be doing 12 to 15 hours a day trying to generate business, or this is a side business to you so you can transition it, right? Now, if you're one of the lucky few or people who really just went into real estate hardcore and you made it work for you, that's amazing. Congratulations. I'd love to have you on the podcast so you can help people figure out how to do that. But for everybody else, that's kind of that is a very typical experience, right? So definitely understand that. But don't be discouraged if this is something that you want to do. I think that this is an amazing career. You get to meet a lot of cool people. A lot of times you make friends with the people that you're working with. And you get to kind of be out in the world and make your own schedule for the most part. So long as you're willing to work 12 hours a day and be available for everybody else. But it's nice, right? So I think those are great kind of parting words, great parting ideas. Again, thank you all for being here. This is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. And thank you again, Mandeep with Orbit Realty, for being here. If you guys have any properties, any real estate needs that you need out in the Yuba area, or even all the way into Sacramento, don't forget to reach out to Mandeep. There's a Randeep out there as well, but this is Mandeep. Thank you guys very much, and you guys have a good day.
Thanks.